Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever LeanTossup CDL betting and picks podcast. This is kind of a new thing we're going to try. Obviously, you've probably seen on Twitter our CDL forecast and modeling, and we're this is kind of a new kind of expansion part for us. We're going to start expanding into CDL betting and hopefully some other sports in the future too. We'll see. Hold on for that, and we'll see that in the future. So today, for our first ever CDL Call of Duty League betting podcast, we are joined here by Ryan, the owner of at CDL Metrics on Twitter. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing well, and actually, my left arm's a little sore today. I did get my first COVID vaccine, but I'm feeling good right now, and I'm excited to talk about CDL Major 2.
That's great. Yeah, it's good to get the COVID vaccine. It's not widely available yet in Canada, but it will be soon. So that's really good.
Okay,
So,
good.
all right. So let's jump in here today. So first things first, uh let's talk about the teams in the losers bracket here first.
Mhm.
So right now, so the two teams, the four teams in the loser bracket, they're going to play off tomorrow afternoon and Wednesday. First matchup, we've got Paris Legion at LA Thieves. Now, so for this, some of the betting lines are out. We're just going to use Bet365 because they have the most comprehensive betting lines out. Bodog has them. They're similar, kind of a little bit different, but very similar. But Bet365 has nice spreads on them, so we're going to use Bet365 lines for the purposes of this podcast. So this is where they are as of now. So Bet365 has Paris Legion minus 163, LA Thieves plus 120. Paris Legion minus 1.5 maps is plus 130, plus 137, and LA Thieves plus 1.5 maps is minus 188. Ryan, what do you think about this? Where do you see the value in this line?
Yeah, I don't see a ton of value either way. There's a lot of question marks with both teams, especially with Thieves. My model currently does have a little bit of value if you do decide to bet LA Thieves on the money line plus 120. And especially so if you think that their roster moves will help them. In case people don't know, Slasher is being subbed out for Draza. So Thieves are working with kind of a 4 SMG on a team meta right now. We'll see how that works out, but we've seen roster moves work out in the past before. Not sure if it'll work against Paris. So this match is mostly a stay away from me. We talked about the spread a little bit. I don't love the value on either side, really, with Paris minus 1.5 plus 137, or with Thieves plus 1.5 at minus 188. So to stay away from me. But again, if you do think Thieves improve with the roster change, I think there might be a case to be made to bet them money line. So
Yeah, I kind of mostly agree with that. I've Paris for me all season has been kind of this kind of middle of the pack team that's like consistently good at times. They're consistently better than market expectations. So this one's kind of all. This is a tough one for me, right? Because Thieves is generally a very public team. People love to bet on them. So generally, you'll see a lot more juiced lines in favor of LA Thieves. And so basically, if this line was a little closer, if there, and again, we could see a lot more money coming in on Thieves in the next couple of days. If more money comes in on Thieves and this Paris line comes down, I definitely hammer that Paris line. But the problem is the fact that we now have Draza on the Thieves, right? And he's replacing. Well, he's not exactly replacing Slasher. 'Cause he's probably going to be he'll be an SMG. But you've got Kenny. Kenny is the main AR. And you've got a bit of a roster shake up there. And I think Slasher and TJ have been kind of the issues, in my opinion, they've been the issues on the team. They've been a little too inconsistent at times. So I I kind of think that Thieves are probably going to overperform expectations. Generally, teams that make roster changes get a boost at times. Um, they generally do perform better, right? We saw this with Minnesota. We've seen this last year with Florida, etc. Generally, teams that and even we saw this kind of Toronto Ultra this earlier this stage. It kind of came out with some more power once they got inside on the team. So we'll have to see exactly, but I don't know. I wouldn't bet. I don't see any value on the Thieves plus 120. If the line was lower, I bet Paris, but maybe the plus 1.5 on Thieves and a parlay piece isn't the worst. This team has had a lot of problems. I think Slasher was part of the problem. And I think the reluctance to do something about Slasher is one of the issues. Um, like Kenny's been good. Kenny's really been the bright spot of the team, really. Like Kenny was good, Temp was good, then they benched Temp. Like I kind of think Temp should be in this roster, but at this moment he's not, right? So it's hard to bet on either of these teams. But if I had to make a bet, it'd probably be plus 1.5 on Thieves. But if Paris went down, maybe I'd bet on Paris as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one to call for sure. I'm excited to watch it just to
Yeah, of
see
course.
what we get from Thieves. And yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me either way if Paris come out and 3-0 them or if Thieves come out and 3-0 them. I think something in between is the most likely scenario. Um, but yeah, first match of the day should be a real good one for sure.
hmm And now we go into our second match here. This is LAG versus Florida. LAG on the money line is plus 110. Florida on the money line is minus 150. Florida the favorites. Match in terms of the spread. LAG plus 1.5 minus 188. Florida minus 1.5 plus 137. So you and I were talking about this earlier, and we both think that there's a wrong team favorite here. Why do you think? Why do you have LAG as the favorites here?
Yeah, it really just comes down to search and destroy. I have LAG pegged as the second best search and destroy team in the league, behind none other than Atlanta FaZe. And I do have LAG slightly listed as the underdog in hardpoint and a decently sized underdog in control, but just the fact that they're so dominant in search should get them at least that map 2 against Florida, who is shaky at best. You know, sometimes we see Awakening just pop off in a search and destroy. We haven't seen that lately from him. If he can do that again, then Florida have a real shot and could actually sweep LAG. But I do think the wrong team is favored here. I have LAG winning this series about 60-61% of the time, somewhere in there. So if you are going to bet this, I at least like LAG on the money line a good bit. And actually, I think it might be better to bet it sooner rather than later, just because we've seen LAG lately. They've been pretty hot. They came out, they beat Atlanta FaZe. They were the first team to do that, albeit in a 3-2. It was a closely contested series. And then they came out and beat LA Thieves, I believe it was 3-0 in the battle for LA. And yeah, so their stock's kind of on the rise. I do think maybe if people are interested in betting, they are going to bet on the Gorillas as underdogs. So if you're looking to bet them now as opposed to just before the match starts. And I also do think there's a little bit of value on them plus the 1.5. But again, I'd prefer to just bet them straight up as the underdog plus 110.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. My model also has when you saying that, I was just going through the rankings on my model, and I also have LAG as the second best S&D team. I have in terms of the hard point. I have the hard points is kind of close to toss ups. I only have Florida. I have like the first one is basically a toss up and LAG favorite in the second one. My model has LAG doing slightly better in the second hard point than the first one, but Florida also struggling in the hard points as well. So like I don't even necessarily agree that their only route through this is S&D control S&D. I don't think that's their only path to victory in this at all. Um, I think this team is like I was honestly like I'm not gonna lie, like a week ago I was gonna write this team off. I was like, this team is done. I mean, right? They got beat by Ultra, they got beat by London, they got beat by someone else. New York beat them too. It's like the last two matches were against LAG and the last two matches were against LA Thieves and Atlanta. And I'm like, they're done, right? I mean, a lot of people were like Atlanta 3-0. I put that in my pick'ems, but like I would never bet that. You never want to bet that heavy of a favorite on anything. And sure enough, they came back, right? And they won that series, right? In just a massive upset. So like I was about to write this team off, but now I'm kind of back on this team. To me, they're kind of like the football analogy to them is actually like it's hilarious. I kind of compare them to like the LA Rams. They're kind of like this slowish, controlish based team. And it's funny because they're both out of LA and they both kind of are home based in SoFi Stadium. 'Cause they did that promo video in SoFi Stadium, but Yeah, like they're kind of like the Rams, and a lot of times the Rams are kind of undervalued compared to other teams. And like the LA, like obviously the Rams are one of the top teams in the NFL, and I don't think LAG is quite there yet. But like I think they're just a good team that is a lot of times overlooked at times. And I think that when you're betting on things, I think sometimes LAG is never a terrible investment. I don't think. What do you think?
Yeah, no, totally agree, and it's really funny you bring up the Gorillas comparison to the Rams because, yeah, not only do they, like, have the same stadium, like, if you watch CDL, you see the Gorillas hype video, right? They're all in SoFi Stadium, and it's awesome, it's all purple and whatever, but, the owner of the team, for the LA Gorillas, it's like, I think it's Kroenke Sports and Entertainment or whatever, and Stan I think his name is Stan Kroenke, is the owner of the Rams, so yeah, they're all tied together, and I do totally get that comparison. And one other thing to mention with Gorillas, yeah, my model loves them. They're the fifth ranked team overall in the CDL. One other thing to mention, the search and destroy. So I feel like maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but the public perception is that search and destroy is the most like toss up game there is, where the worst team can beat the best team any day of the week. Like it's easy to pull out those round by round wins. And I kind of think of search and destroy the opposite way. I do think the teams that are good at it are very good at it. You take a game like Hardpoint, for example, where spawn points, that sort of thing can get squirrely at times. So you throw in that randomness, and you can see, a heavy favorite in Hardpoint lose any given day. So that's all the more reason why I like LA Gorillas. Now, obviously, they could lose their first match versus Florida. Florida is a formidable opponent. I do think Gorillas are going to struggle in the control. That's one area where Florida have been pretty good. So I don't expect an LAG sweep by any means. I think if they get it done, they get it done in 5 maps, having, maybe map 1, 2, and 5, or 2, 4, 5, something like that. But I do still think there is sort of this public perception that Gorillas, yeah, they beat FaZe, but it was an off day for FaZe. But honestly, like they're competing. They're showing me a lot lately.
Yeah, and I agree with that assessment about S&D, right? I think I kind of agree with that. A lot of people think like it's a coin flip mode, and it's definitely not. I think my personal opinion on it is that it's the people who put the most work into it, right? And I think that also varies through the season, right? So I think you see a lot of times teams that are really good at S&D will suddenly become not good at S&D, and I'm fairly sure that relates to how much practice time they're putting in, right? And how much they're studying other teams, right? So as you go through, you're doing your VOD review video on demand, and basically you're seeing what other teams are doing, and then if you're adjusting your strategies accordingly, if you're putting in that work, then you will improve at S&D. And I think there's some teams who are like, oh, we're good at S&D, we're the top, we're perfect at S&D, we don't need to improve, and then they start sliding down, and then other teams overtake them because they learn from the best teams, and then they copy that, and then that's how they get up there, right? And I think this is where like a lot of people, we'll talk about Optic later, but a lot of people are like Optic's prob is S&D, and like it has been at times. They're still not a terrible S&D team. They just end up losing a lot of clutch S&Ds to some top teams, and that's costing the match. You're like, it's S&D's the problem. But the problem though is the fact that I think once a team figures out S&D, they become really hard to stop. And I think obviously we'll talk about Optic later, but I kind of think now they've figured out S&D. And I think once a team figures out search, I think like Atlanta has figured out how to do search a lot of the times. Um, LAG has. Some of the other teams have kind of figured it out. I think once if you have a really strong plan for your search or destroy, you know exactly what the opponent's going to do, and you know how to counter them, then I think you'll go really far in this. I think this was, I believe it was on the flank actually. Octane was talking about that in terms of their match against Paris, how they beat Paris. I think they beat Paris 3-0. I think. Yeah, they did beat Paris 3-0. They were talking about in the S&D that basically after going through the match, he basically said like, yeah, like we Paris did exactly what they did last time they played Miami, right? They did exactly what they did. We knew exactly how to counter them, and that was it. And like that's how you win in this game, right? Like if you know exactly what the team's going to do, you could just completely hard counter them, and it's done, right? And that's how you win S&Ds. And I think
Mhm.
if you do that and you're able to learn what the other teams are going to do, then you get those wins, right? And then you become a better S&D team. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, all those are great examples. Paris, you mentioned their S&D struggles, especially against Seattle, who, Seattle isn't a great team overall, and they're okay in search, but yeah, Paris I have as the worst search and destroy team in the league. I think we see it when we watch them. Their strategies aren't there, or they're getting countered so easily that, it's not an instant loss for them to lose a search and destroy, but it's concerning. Now they make up for it because they're actually very good at hardpoint and, pretty good in control as well. So they can get series in 3 games or 4 games at times. But yeah, search teams just need to practice search. We saw, what's Atlanta's best game mode so far this year? I think everyone would say search. And there's a reason why they're the best team in the league. Now they're good at hardpoint and control as well, but their search is so dominant. I think teams are starting to catch up a little bit with them, but yeah, if you're not putting in the practice in search and destroy, like you're a little bit behind the 8 ball for sure.
For sure. So that wraps up Wednesday's matches. Let's talk about Thursday's matches now. So now we're gonna go into another one that we think has the wrong team favored right now. First match is Dallas versus New York. Bet365 has Dallas minus 163, New York plus 120. For the spread, Dallas minus 1.5 maps plus 125, New York plus 1.5 maps minus 175. You and I both agree on this. We both have New York favored over Dallas. Um, why do you think? Well, first of all, why do you think the books have it this way, and why do you think New York is favored over Dallas?
Yeah, I don't know. So when it comes to fan bases, like we see it with other leagues too. There are just popular teams that garner a lot of bets. And I think Dallas, they're not, optic or, maybe Atlanta, but they're up there in terms of just total fan base. I think New York aren't really quite one of those teams. They, represent the biggest city in the US, but I don't think they have a giant fan base. I think people just attach themselves with brands, fall in love and want to bet on those teams. And I think Dallas is getting some of that love. I also think people are taking into account Dallas's last match versus Optic. Obviously, a very good opponent. They did lose. They lost both Search and Destroys, I believe. So I think people think like, oh, they just got to clean up Search and Destroy, and then they're a really good team. And while they're not wrong in that thinking, cleaning up search and destroy, as we've just discussed, can be difficult. So we'll see. I think, this game I have is basically a toss up. I have New York winning it about 52, 53% of the time. So yeah, I call it a toss up. So if that's the case, just give me the team that's plus money on the money line. That being New York, they're plus 120. And we actually think, we discussed earlier, we might see that number tick up. So if you're looking to bet New York, maybe wait a little while as more Dallas money comes in. We'll see how high that number can get. But New York, I have as clear favorites in the search and destroy. Again, not that New York is amazing at search, but Dallas, very, very worrisome in that game mode. And that's the only game mode I have New York favored in. I do think the hard points and the control are going to be close. So you kind of split those up. You give New York both searches. That's probably how they win. It's probably going to be 5 maps if it is New York. Probably going to be 4 maps if Dallas does win. So I'm super, super excited for this match. I know we've already seen it one time, maybe twice throughout the season.
Twice, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I do remember one was New York went up 2-0 and Dallas reverse swept. And then I can't recall the second one, but I'm sure it was good. And this one should be a great match as well.
Actually, has it been 3 times? It actually
Has
has been
it
3
really?
times. Actually, because the
Oh,
first
wow.
one was the, opening week. It was the opening week grudge match thing.
Oh, the kickoff weekend.
Kickoff weekend, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I don't even count that. That
That
was
one
a
doesn't
Dallas
count, yeah, that
sweep.
one this was
Yeah,
a
that
3-0 sweep. Then it
yeah.
was Group 1 pool play. That was when New York went up 2-0, Dallas reverse swept them. And then I think it was the final of the losers bracket, right? Because New York swept Optic, and then Dallas,
Yes,
yeah, Dallas
yes.
played Atlanta. Dallas lost to Atlanta. Then they went into the losers bracket. Then they swept New York, and then Dallas versus Atlanta was the final. So technically, we've seen this three times. Two of them have ended up with a 3-0 Dallas sweep. Um, but I still won't like New York though. Like this is the thing. Like Dallas
Mhm.
has kind of fallen a bit from where they were um after stage one. They're not nearly as strong of a team as they were during stage one. And I think that New York has improved. Some of their members of the team are playing a little bit better actually than they were before. The other interesting thing about the Optic game is interesting you bring that up. I mean, obviously we know Optic won in a game five, but honestly, if a couple things break differently, that could have been an Optic 3-0, right? I mean,
Honestly, yeah, for
yeah, like
sure.
you look at that last hill on in game one, Dallas got a crucial last second break. If they didn't get that break right there, like Optic would have won. They only need a couple. Like, they only need, like 5 more points. So they got the break, got to the last 5 points. Again, I think Optic was what 8 points back or something. Like Optic could have easily won that hill too. So like that could have gone. That could have been a win for Optic. Obviously, Optic wins the search, and then game three, that was that 1v1 Scump versus Illy, and like Scump wins as the 3. Like that would have been the 3-0, right? And then again, they Optic dominated the hard point, and then they dominated game five, right? So like it's really like that could have easily been a 3-0 or 3-1 if you flip one of those two, right? So like I don't 100% think that meant like that matchup was not as close as people think it was. I don't think like the perception of it is that it was a really close. It was close, but it was like it could have easily been a 3-0 in terms of the number. So yeah, I'm taking. I know I keep getting burned picking New York over Dallas, but like yeah, I think maybe this time they can actually finally do it. They can get over that hump, but they could beat Dallas. Glacier can finally get his revenge.
Yeah, for sure. And one other point with this game, and then we can move on to the next one. I think for betting lines, how they adjust and whatnot, people love to look at previous matches head to head, and they look at, oh, Dallas has beaten New York, twice. They swept them the last time they were in an official match, and if you want to include kickoff weekend, they swept them there too, and they reverse swept them in stage one. Like, people love that. They go, oh, Dallas just has New York's number. And I think that is just not a good way to think about it. Yes, maybe certain teams match up better against other certain teams, but this is a case where we have two really good teams. And New York has just, in my opinion, outplayed Dallas in you go match by match. New York grades out just a little better, in my opinion. And yeah, I think this could be the time where they finally get it done. If they don't, I'll be a little sad. I mean, I said this before we started the podcast. I am a bit of a Dallas Empire fan, not a huge fanboy. I kind of want to see New York win this match finally. Just yeah, again for that Clayster revenge. But I'm super excited. I was excited for the Paris LA Thieves match we talked about earlier, but like this match on Thursday is gonna be wow. It's gonna be really good.
Yeah, this could be the best match of Thursdays. We'll because we're gonna have to project a couple matches on Thursday in a second. So we'll get that in a second. So let's go to the last currently scheduled Thursday match. Obviously, two more are scheduled, but that's going to depend on the results of the losers bracket round one on Wednesday. Toronto Ultra versus Optic. Toronto plus 125 on the 125 on the money line. Optic minus 300. On the spread, Toronto plus 1.5 minus 110. Optic minus 1.5 minus 125. So again, I'm from Canada, so I generally and I'm from the Greater Toronto area, so I'm a Toronto fan. Um, I I'm not high on Toronto on this one. I kind of thought like I kind of surprised that that they beat Lag honestly. I had them I had that against them in the pick'ems in the CDL prediction thing. I had Lag 3-2 on that. Which could have happened. But um I I'm not the biggest fan of this. I think my big question on this why is the plus 1.5 minus 110 on this for Toronto? I don't think that's like for like, I think there could be some value on that number, but I don't like I think that number needs to be a lot. That needs to be a plus number for me. That number needs to be probably close to plus 150 for me to even think about touching the plus 1.5 on Toronto. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in total agreement on that. I think if you're just talking money line and spreads, I think Toronto plus 1.5 is the worst bet you could make at minus 110. I also don't understand why it's that high. It definitely needs to get past even money for me to bet it. Um, and on the other side, I think Chicago minus 125 is the way to go if you do decide to bet on this game. or on this match, I should say. Chicago should win this in 4. They could sweep it. I'd be a little surprised if it goes to a map 5, to be honest. Chicago has been one of the most improved teams just over the last week. Obviously, the week before that was very bad for them. I believe they were swept by New Rocker with Standy. And then I want to say they were swept by Florida as well. Um, and now
Yes,
last
it was
week,
Florida. Yeah.
okay, last week a lot more improvement. Obviously, they beat Dallas in a game that they kind of had to have. So now they get Toronto, who I have pegged as a middle of the pack team. They're 6th overall in my rankings. So not a pushover team whatsoever. The money line odds I don't love for either side. Those are more of a stay away for me. So I think if you're going to bet anything, bet on the Chicago resurgence. And Chicago are just one of those teams that they're good. They are full of good players. It's major time. It's time to show up. It's time to beat Toronto. And I think they do that probably in 3 or 4 maps, which is why I like that map spread at -1.5. So it should be, a decent match. And if Toronto can pull off the upset, I will be amazed. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's hard, right? Because the thing is, do we really buy that Chicago is back? I mean, I think the problem with Chicago last week, well, not last week, 2 weeks ago, when week 2, was that they had some issues. Dashy was not firing on all cylinders. Dashy was really struggling, and I think he's found his footing now with a QBZ, so he's doing a bit better. Or I can't remember if he switched to the cricket. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he definitely had a lot better week this week. Um, the thing about Toronto is that they're really good at making it go to 5 games. That's like their if Toronto has one like weird ability, it's making a series go to 5 games. And like they've done this so many times in not even this year and last year. And again, a lot of the same similarities between teams this year and last year. They loved going to game 5 and then promptly losing that game 5. So like I sometimes one of the things I love doing is I love like Toronto +1.5 and then the team they're facing again off against +1.5s because like they love going to game 5s. The thing though is that this line is like at -110. That's a horrible price to bet that at. Like I think like, if that was like +150, I'd consider it. I don't know. I don't love this team without Methods. I was very sad when they dropped Methods. I guess he's still on the team, but when they benched him, like Insight is I guess okay, but Methods wasn't the problem. Like sure you replaced if you want to make the argument that Insight's better than Methods, okay, fine. I won't fight against that argument because fine. If you want to say fine, they replaced Methods with a better Methods than the main AR, fine, sure, okay. But that wasn't the problem, and I still think that's very debatable the first step. But fine, whatever. Say that's true. You replaced Methods with a slightly better Methods. That doesn't fix the problem, right? There's still problems, inconsistency issues with Bance and Kleenex, and even Cammy sometimes has an off map or two, right? Like this is the real problem with this team. And if you get a good map out of Kleenex and Bance, sure, this team's good, but and they go to game 5s, but I don't know, and I think Optic is. I honestly like it's very arguable that this Toronto team should have made it to the winners bracket. I don't think they should have with just 2 wins. Like we get with the way that the pool play works, we get some really kind of funky results with 2 wins, and they really lucked out that the other two teams they beat were also teams that had 2 wins. So they got very lucky with that one. But no, it's I don't know. I don't love I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I'm taken with the Optic -1.5. I don't know, but I'll have to think about it. But I'm not picking Toronto here. I definitely think Optic wins probably closer to a 3-1 than a maybe a 3-1 or a 3-0. But
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And then just one other point with Toronto, we were talking about teams that, when it comes to search and destroy, you do want to put an emphasis on that game mode. And Toronto are one of those teams that can cause headaches in that game mode. We've seen them beat Atlanta in it, and just watching them play, it seems like their whole strategy, and it works apparently, is just be weird. Like just do weird stuff in search and destroy that the other team isn't expecting, and it seems to pay off more than it doesn't. And maybe teams catch up with that, and they start to realize, oh, Toronto like to do weird stuff. Let's counter that however we can. I don't know the exact way you would counter that. Just expect it, I guess. But yeah, if Toronto don't win the game 2 search and destroy, I think the likelihood that this is a sweep is pretty high. With all that said, Toronto, they're a good preparation team. I'm sure they'll be all ready for this, hyped up for the Chicago match. But um, yeah, I'm just interested to see how they come out in the search and destroy, and if they show any sort of improvement in hardpoint or control. Their control on the year very worrisome. Hardpoint is a game that they could maybe take off of Chicago, but again, Chicago, one of the best teams in hardpoint and control. So a lot to prove for Toronto.
Yeah, one more before we move on to the next set of games. I think one more kind of concerning thing, especially for that, is that when Toronto played Phase in Stage Two, they were just got completely deflated, and you saw that. Remember in the comms that comms where like they were just like because they did the listen in it, that was brutal, and they just got completely destroyed, and you could tell that they were not in that at all. And the thing is, when they've played Phase in Stage One pool play, they actually did a lot better against FaZe. They got that 3-1. They almost got that to a game 5. But here they got like just completely blown out. And the question is, was it that they just got completely deflated? Was there some sort of mental issue there, or was it that they just like they went up against a good team they didn't think they could win and they didn't win, right? Because that was, I think, the second map after they picked up Insight. So that was his second map with the team. So like it's hard to say exactly. Like, I don't know. I think that's just a risk with Toronto that if they just go up against a good team, that they could just get deflated. And like, it's weird that they didn't have it against New York. Maybe that's just an Atlanta thing, or maybe optic Atlanta Dallas. They got in their own heads, but I don't know. It's a concerning thing for me going forward when I see them, and I don't know. I like Toronto. I just don't see them pulling off this upset, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, going on to the next one. So now we're going to talk about elimination round 2. So these are going to be the back matches on Thursday, and then we'll talk about kind of winners round 2. That'll be the Friday morning matches. Or Friday afternoon, sorry. Map so then the next map, so basically assuming that all we're going to for these we have to project forward. So we're just going to assume all of our predictions are correct. Seattle versus LAG. My model has LAG as about a minus 110 favorite. Obviously, so the way that's assuming no fig. So basically, books will not give you that price. It would probably be something minus 130 plus 100 or so, give or take, because they have to take their cut of the line, right? So that wouldn't be an exact price, but that would probably be about that. Um, so it would be about that price, but substantially down. Who do you think? So do you think LAG is the correct favorite against Seattle, or do you think that or do you think that Seattle could take that one?
Yeah, so my model, for whatever reason, hates the Seattle Surge. It has them ranked as the last team in the league, and I don't always agree with my model. Sometimes my model can spit out numbers I don't like, and that might be one of them. We've seen Seattle improve a little bit over the course of stage two. Um, and I don't know, against LAG, the matchup you talk about player by player matchups, I might like Seattle. Now, to win the match, I don't know. LAG, I would have pegged as a pretty heavy favorite, probably a heavier favorite than you. You said, I think, minus 110 or so. Right now, my model says, as of right now, if they played a match today, LAG would be a 77% favorite, which again, that feels really high.
Yeah,
It like
I've got a 52% favorite. So that's yeah.
Okay. So we're way off there. So this might just be, if this does happen, it might just be a stay away from me. Um, but it does like Seattle a little bit in hard point, and I totally buy into that. Um, maybe my model isn't adjusting enough for the hard point love with Seattle, but you talk about search and destroy again. LAG, second best team in that mode. Seattle down near the bottom. And then you talk about control, not as lopsided, but I do still like LAG in that mode. So I think most likely if we're getting this match, we're getting the LAG 3-2 over Seattle. But again, we might not even see LAG make it here. We like them over Florida, but yeah, I'm just curious to see if Seattle can kind of keep up the momentum that they've built over the course of stage two.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing I completely I agree with you on the point of a game 5 in that matchup. So like if we see that line comes live on Thursday morning, and you see that as like Seattle plus 1.5, plus 120, grab that. I think we're all kind of in agreement that that's some pretty good value right there.
Mhm.
Um, so I actually just punched it in with Florida, assuming. Now again, this doesn't actually account for the fact that Florida would have beaten LAG, so they would have improved slightly. But basically, I have that as a toss up. Like Seattle, like 50.4% chance of winning that, so it's like functionally a toss up either way. Um, so again, my model actually does kind of like Seattle. It has it just going through the rankings here. It has Seattle as the sixth best hardpoint team, the sixth best S&D team, and the 10th ranked control team. So like not bad, like kind of decidedly middle of the pack. Overall, it ranks at ninth. Um, my model doesn't hate Seattle. I actually kind of like Seattle overall as a team. I think there is some problems with the team. I think those problems kind of I think basically the way it works is this. I like when this team first formed over the summer. I actually really liked this team, and I still kind of do. I think the problem is Octane has. I don't know. He's a really good player, but it honestly feels like when Octane can't be the best player on the team. It honestly feels like if Gunless has a good game, then Octane is allowed to have a slightly worse game, and then they do really well. Like Octane, like you have to get the pressure off of Octane. If there's a ton of pressure on Octane to be the best player on the team, then he struggles and the team struggles. But if you get Gunless having a good game, then Octane can play his game, and then the team is able to just completely dominate. Because then you get Pristini running around, and then you get then Looney. They can do their thing. And like when the team fires on all cylinders, they're actually a pretty good team. But you need to get the pressure off Octane to be the best player on the team, and I think the team actually does really well. What do you think about the dynamics in that team?
Yeah, I agree. I think O Octane's a good AR, don't get me wrong, but Seattle's success is more dependent on, I think, 1, Prestini, and then 2, Gunless. Looney is I don't know. He's a solid player. He fits the team well, but we never really see him. He's kind of the dirty worker, I guess. You never see his KD like going off. He's not the slayer. He does all the dirty work. I've seen maps where Prestini does really well, and we go, holy crap, Seattle could beat anyone. If Prestini's playing like this, you have Octane to just kind of anchor you. He's steady. And if Gunless can kind of get there with Prestini, then Seattle could be a really hard out. That being said, when I look at kind of team by team, Seattle versus LAG, I do like LAG's sub duo a decent bit more than Seattle's, and that's mostly due to just Prestini's just overall volatility. You know, a lot of times we see bad Pristini, but sometimes we see good Pristini. And then Looney's just kind of been fine. I think Vivid has high upside. And I think he could carry the sub duo of the Gorillas. Apathy we've seen from time to time go off. The back line, I kind of like Seattle more. We talk about Octane, we talk about Gunless versus Silly, although Silly's been kind of silly lately. And then Assault, fine. It's just a really hard game for me because I don't necessarily agree with my model that Gorillas should be a huge favorite. Um, so it's really tough to judge. I'll have to see how Gorillas or Mutineers, whoever wins that match, play against each other before I'm ready to kind of make a prediction on this Seattle versus whoever it is match. So
Yeah, I think I kind of think that's I like it could be a very close game. I think Seattle has kind of is a bit more dynamic in that case. I think in that case you have I think you have the ability like if Pristini and Gunless do really well, then Octane will just do good too, and then it's a blowout, right? But if Pristini struggles and Gunless struggle, and then Octane has to carry it all, then it starts hurting, and I think the team starts dragging at that point, right? Um, so the AR on LAG is Assault, right?
yep.
Yeah. The change I'd love is actually if that was Methods instead of Assault. I think that would be
Yeah,
a really good team. Like
I wouldn't mind that. And yeah, I don't know. We see just roster shuffles, you know, they work sometimes. And it'll be tough though. I know Silly and Assault have been teamed together for a while, so I feel like if you lose one of those guys, you lose both of them. And with Silly playing as good as he has been, I think it's tough to pull Assault off the team as well. It definitely, you can make a case that Method should be the AR on that team. I don't expect that to happen. But yeah, it'd be interesting to say the least. One thing to note, I did say Seattle was my 12th ranked team. They're actually 11th, so I don't want to discredit them completely. I do have London behind them, who we'll get to in a little bit. But one other thing of note, I talked about the discrepancy in Search and Destroy, where I have Gorillas favored heavily over Seattle. Another mode that I kind of glanced over, Control. Seattle worries me a lot in Control. I believe they've only won controls on Garrison this year. I want to say they're 0-6 if playing on Checkmate and Raid. So if you're Gorillas, you veto Garrison control, and you're feeling really good about that map, and you're feeling pretty good that you'll just win Search and Destroy based off of how strong you are in that game mode. So that's another reason why I think that's probably why my model skews towards LAG a little bit, maybe too much, but just another thing I wanted to note.
That's a good point. It's hilarious that they do the best on the worst control map. Um,
Honestly, yeah.
that map's so horrible. God, like I mean, all of them are well, except for Raid. Raid's awesome. I love Raid, but other than like Garrison and Checkmate are just they're horrible to play on. And that's, of course, whenever I play League Play, those are the only maps I ever get. So
Right, right.
that's that. No, it's like it's legitimately like that's like a couple weeks ago. I hadn't got a chance to play Express S&D, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna just play until I get Express, and then like I got like straight checkmates for everything. It was like checkmate hardpoint, checkmate controls, checkmate S&D. And I was like, oh for God's sakes! Finally got Express, dominated. That was great. That was like my best map ever. I've had in, like weeks, but like it took a long time to get there. A lot of checkmates, but it was worth it in the end. So, all right, the second last match here that we're going to talk about, this one again would be decided by who wins. So if we get, so it's London is in. Well, they kind of get the losers bracket by if Paris beats Thieves, which they're they're favored to, but again we'll run it both ways. So if Paris wins, they are favorites to beat London, but if the Thieves win, London is a favorite, about a -110 favorite. Both basically, if Paris would be a -110 favorite, London would be a -110 favorite. The issue, though, is the fact that if Thieves does better, then if Thieves does really well and beats Paris, then they would be favorites over London. London it is so weird that they snuck in here. Like like I have them as the 11th team. I think you said you have them as the worst team. I have LA Thieves as the worst team. They just kind of gotten beat up a bit on Elo in the last couple weeks. But like it's the weirdest dynamic that they somehow snuck out of losers round one and don't have to play like that. That's kind of insane of how this scheduling works. That they get to just kind of escape that. It's so weird.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, they have improved a lot from stage one to stage two. And my model doesn't necessarily weight one stage over the other. So that's why my model really dislikes them, is because they were so bad in stage one. So the actual numbers, I think I would adjust in London's favor a little bit. But according to my model, if it's London versus Paris, London versus Thieves, it doesn't really matter because Paris and Thieves are pretty close to the same, in my opinion. I'd have London pegged at about a 30% chance to win either match. Maybe bump that up a little more just due to recent performance. Maybe it's closer to 35%, maybe even 40%. But yeah, I don't know. Just another team that like doesn't really excite me. They've had a lot of roster moves and drama with getting certain players. Like Zero is across the pond in the UK. He should be on their team, but he's not. He's just kind of stuck over there with travel restrictions and whatnot. I know they signed a really good amateur player, Afro, but he also is in the UK competing in Challengers. So they have really good guys that we haven't even really seen yet, but they've kind of worked around that. They've, obviously picked up Zed, who paired up with Dylan has looked, for the most part, decent. And then, we had the whole Parasite thing in stage one. He gets subbed out for rookie Paul X, who is on that phenomenal Westar team. They showed immediate improvement. I remember they took out Toronto. Wait, I could be wrong with that. They took out Thieves for sure. I don't recall their other, because they had 2 wins in group, or it's stage 2, correct?
Yeah, they beat Toronto and
Toronto and Thieves, right?
yeah, I think that's what they beat. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, we've seen the improvement from them. Uh, I don't know. The last week or so wasn't phenomenal. And honestly, I don't really think this match, whatever it is, London Paris or London Thieves, unless Thieves show us a lot in that first match versus Paris, I'm not super excited for this match any way, shape, or form. Um, but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Maybe you have a little more hope for London?
No.
Fair
uh,
enough.
I don't know. I mean, like I saw them being Toronto. This is again. I'm kind of a Toronto nihilist at this point. So I didn't think I thought Toronto would lose to LAG, and then they didn't, and that kind of surprised me. But no, like I'm not. The team has definitely improved. The team was horrible during stage one. They didn't win a single game. With Paul X coming in and Zed coming in, Dylan has performed a lot. Dylan, I think, has kind of been the new kind of carry on the team. He was really bad during stage one, and he's definitely improved stage two, and that's really helped the team not be the worst. But I mean, no, I'm still not. I don't buy that this team is still a really good. Like I don't think this team can compete. And I kind of think they're just kind of sitting here and waiting for some other like a losers bracket team to just kind of pick them off. And I think that that'll be it for them. They still have a lot of improvements to go, but I mean, again, the team they kind of got their roster in kind of late. They are also hamstrung by the fact that you can't really get a visa to come from the UK to the US very easily. Again, maybe that could clear up in the future, maybe in future years, or maybe even later on the season. But again, we're almost halfway through the season, right? So, um, yeah, not the greatest position for London to be in. I I don't know. I maybe they can pick up some amateur talent, but they're kind of stuck. It seems like them and Paris kind of don't really want to make a ton of changes. That they're just kind of stuck with their team, and then they're not really going to do anything about that. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't think maybe they can improve a bit. We'll have to see. They did add Paul X, so maybe they're more willing to make a change to something like Paris. But yeah, I'm not the most convinced that this team is going to go long in the losers bracket. I don't. I'm not particularly high on them. All right. So moving on to kind of the last two games that we're going to talk about. Again, these are also predicted games that we'll talk about too. These would be the winners bracket round two games. So this is what we'll get to talk about every single team here. It would be according to our projections of Optic over Toronto and New York over Dallas. It would be FaZe versus Optic, and Minnesota Rocker versus Subliners. Um, I have Atlanta as a 58% chance to win, about a minus 140 favorite, and I have New York as about a 53% chance to win over Minnesota, about a minus 112 favorite. If that's Toronto over Atlanta, well, we don't need to see that. That's going to be gruesome. And if it's Dallas versus Minnesota, it's going to be Dallas in a toss-up. But again, the big value on the plus 1.5 for Minnesota, as we've seen that matchup. This would be the third time we've seen that matchup. We've seen Minnesota pull off a game five search win to beat Dallas. Um, what do you think? Do you think that what do we think about Optic versus Atlanta round two? Because Optic took Atlanta to the brink there. The first time they played, that was just their hardest match of stage one, pretty much. Do you think that Optic can finally pull off the upset? Is Atlanta a bit weakened? What do you think?
No, but I will say, yeah, these are teams 1 and 2 in my power ranking. So I think this is a preview of the grand final. And I know we're not going to do predictions all the way there, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Atlanta over Chicago, 5-3 probably in the grand final. In this series, I'm thinking Atlanta in 5 again. It's what we saw in stage one. But I will say, if we take into account recent performance, Chicago, they have a legit chance to knock off Atlanta. Obviously, Atlanta lost to Gorillas last week. That was a big shock. I think that match, not to take anything away from Gorillas, but I think Atlanta was working on their map pool, trying different things. I don't think they intentionally tried to lose the match, obviously, but I think they kind of got caught off by Gorillas. It was a good map set for Gorillas, and they took advantage of it. Chicago, on the other hand, bounced back in a big way. I do think they'll get past Toronto in round one. And I do think this match should be a classic like we saw in stage one. Now, I don't have Chicago favored in any game mode versus Atlanta, but I do think they're close enough in hard point and in control where they could get, one hard point and maybe get the control out. And we've seen a lot of search and destroy improvement, which is what I love to see from them. So, all that being said, my model says Atlanta should be a 70% favorite. Again, probably a little high if we take into account recent performance. But it should be a really, really good match, and hopefully one we'll see on Sunday as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think probably the reason why Optic isn't favored in any mode is because they had a bunch of game one hardpoint losses. They actually lost their last three game one hardpoints. They won game four hardpoint against Dallas, but they lost the hardpoint against Minnesota, who at that time was bad, and they lost the hardpoint against Florida, who was also at that point a bit weaker too. So their basically their hardpoint strength has been dropped down a lot in the last little bit. Um, and if they're having kind of like team or role issues or something like that, then that definitely kind of has artificially lowered them. So we might actually be kind of underestimating them in kind of how strong they can be. So I don't think I agree to not completely write them off. I think that Atlanta 58% is not that's not an accurate number, and I wouldn't take that to the bank. I definitely probably bet Optic in that case, maybe plus 1.5, because again, and as we've seen, I think um, when you go back to the to how LAG beat Atlanta, right? I mean, LAG won through the S&Ds, right? They won both the S&Ds and won the one hard point. Cool. They almost won the control too, which was interesting. But I think for other teams to beat Atlanta, I mean, we have LAG as the second best S&D team. For other teams to beat for other teams to beat Atlanta, you have to beat them through the respawns, right? Like you can't beat them in S&D. I mean, here's the thing: Optic has improved in S&D, right? They could beat them in S&D, but I think if you're not beating them in hardpoint, I think if you lose them in hardpoint and then you lose them in S&D, obviously it's over. You have no chance. But Optic is really good at control. They have been really good at control in the past. Um, I think there's a very good chance of like maybe even a 3-1 here if you go hard point control hard point. I think you could do that against Atlanta, and then just completely neutralize the S&D. I think this is a good match. Atlanta versus Optic is pretty much always a good match. I kind of agree that this is probably one of my picks for the grand finals. I think after this, probably we'll do one more match and then we'll talk about our picks for the finals and stuff. But yeah, I think this is a good match, and I think depending on where the line comes out, and again, Optic is obviously a heavy betting favorite team. We'll have to see if the money comes in on Optic. I'd bet when that line comes live on Friday morning, I'd bet the line sooner rather than later because there's probably gonna be late money coming out on Optic, so I'd bet it earlier. But I think there's probably gonna open up of some value on Optic. The second match, it's either gonna be Dallas versus Minnesota or New York. Um, Basically, Dallas played Minnesota again this round. Minnesota beat them in a game five. The second time they beat them in game five. New York versus Minnesota. The model has New York as about a minus 112 favored, about a 53% chance. Do you think that's right, or do you think Minnesota has a chance here? This team has really been surprising since they got Standy. It was weird because I didn't think Major Maniac was the problem on the team. I still don't. I kind of I if I was the GM, I'd probably swap back out accuracy for Major Maniac. But what do you think? Do you think that do you think that Minnesota has a chance here, or do you think that New York will just kind of steamroll through them?
Yeah, Minnesota is by far the hardest team for me to figure out, and I'm a fan of Minnesota. I like what they're doing with the roster. Standy has looked like ridiculously good. Now I don't think he'll keep up the level that he's been at. He's been at like MVP level so far. I think that'll come back down to earth a little bit. Um, and honestly, my model really likes the subliners and really does not like Rocker. So for this match, I would expect subliners to win probably in 4 maps. I would think Minnesota could take that game two search, maybe the game three control. We have seen subliners maybe getting a little weaker in those modes, especially control. But we talk about hard points. Minnesota, yes, they've been better, and especially so in hardpoint, but I can't discount how bad of a team they were in stage one and early in stage 2 before they had Standy. And I know one player can make a difference in COD. There's only 4 on the map for any given team. So inserting new player could be everything for a team, and maybe that is the case with Rocker. But man, I worry a lot about the hard points with this team. New York have just been steady as she goes, consistently good all year. And if Minnesota were to pull off the upset against New York in this hypothetical match, or against Dallas, we've seen them beat Dallas a couple times actually. But if they can beat New York, who I have graded higher than Dallas, then my model's going to eat that up. It's going to love Minnesota going forward. Especially so if they can do it in a way that's not game 2 search and destroy win, game 3 control win, game 5 search and destroy win, because that's kind of been the blueprint for Minnesota. And listen, like, however you can win a match, you win it like that. If you're not good at hard point, okay, win it 2-3-5. But they got to show me something, because they're not even close to the elite teams in that one game mode.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. I think it was when they went down 0-2 against Seattle earlier. I think it was on Saturday. That was concerning. I thought that's it. They're done. Right? Seattle's going to win the series. They'll win the hard point, or they'll control. Right? Maybe Minnesota wins the control, but then Seattle will win the hard point, and that's it. We're done. But no, apparently Minnesota was able to win a hard point to save their skins, and then go to Game 5 S&D, and then they're able to pull it out, right? I mean, it's hard to beat a team when they can anchor when they can just win Game 5, right? When they can pretty much win every Game 5 that they play. I don't think they've lost a Game 5 all season, I don't think. Um, if they can just win every Game 5, it is extremely hard to beat that team. Actually, although they did lose a Game 5. They lost to Toronto in Stage 1
Toronto,
playoff,
yeah.
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 But they had actually beaten Toronto in a Game 5 previous, right? So, but no, it's hard to beat that team. And the thing is, when are they going to be able to start winning hard points consistently, right? We know that it's coming. We know that they could do that. We know they're going to be able to win a hard point eventually. If they win a hard point against New York, then they win an S&D against New York, then the plus 1.5 is already cashed. That's the spread already. And then you can maybe they can win a control or an S&D, and then get to that. It's hard. It's not easy. I do like this team. I don't know. Between, like, I have them ranked. I have it New York the third, Dallas the fourth, and Minnesota the fifth. But basically, there's a 1 point difference between Minnesota and Dallas, which is functionally nothing. Then New York's about 10 points, 10 ELO points better than them. So they're still pretty close all overall. Then there's a kind of a big gap between Minnesota and the sixth team, which is LAG. But it's I don't know. This team has been completely different with Standy, and again, they kept that really close against Surge. And again, if Miami had gone a bit differently, they could have, like, Seattle could have beaten them in that Game 5 Surge, right? Which shows that you can never fully lock down Search and Destroy, right? Like, you can always still lose a Search and Destroy. Um, but yeah, it's hard. I don't know how I want to bet this. It's going to depend on where the numbers actually come out. If New York's a big favorite, then I think there's value on Minnesota plus 1.5. But if it's kind of tied, I think there's probably value on the subliners. Um, they are undefeated since Standy's come on, but again, they have to lose eventually.
Yeah, and we've talked about Standy a lot, and he has helped the team immensely. I think what gets lost in there is Priesta's move from SMG to the flex position, where he's looked very, very good. Obviously, they haven't lost a match yet, but just that whole roster shuffle, it's really hard to put into context how much Minnesota's changed recently. And that's why I think it makes it a headache to try to, like, figure out their odds versus any other given team. Because, like you said, your model has them pegged at number 5 right now. Mine is probably the lowest you're ever going to see out of anybody that ranks CDL teams. I have them at 10. Now, that's my model. If you ask me, they're probably a couple spots at least higher than that. But it's really tough. I'm not expecting a great match in this, just because my model loves New York. But if Minnesota can at least keep it close, I think it could be a really, really intriguing match. And I think we're going to learn a lot about, especially Minnesota, but also New York with this series, should it happen. And if it's Dallas, we've already seen Minnesota be able to beat them a couple of times, both ways, 2 search and destroy wins and a control win. That is their blueprint. I think if New York get the right vetoes on Minnesota, really study up on search and in control, and just kind of believe that they're the better hardpoint team, that they'll at least split them. Worst case scenario, I think, yeah, we should see a New York win, or a Dallas win should it be them. I think they eventually bounce back. But I don't know, Minnesota, even if they lose, I think they could make a little bit of a losers bracket run. But yeah, for me, it's a wait and see approach with Minnesota for now, just until we get more data points with Sandy in the lineup and with Priest at flex. But yeah, I'll for sure enjoy watching this match.
Yeah. Um, all right, so let's do predictions. So you think Atlanta Optic for the final?
Yeah, so Atlanta should make the final, I think, and I can't underestimate how important that that winners bye is, because you really only have to win 3 series to win the whole thing, and one of them is an extended series. Uh, but yeah, Atlanta, they're just on another tier despite the loss to Gorillas. It's them, and then there's a gap, and then there's, that handful of teams that are in the mix. We talked about them: New York, Chicago, Dallas, that bunch. Um, so I expect it to be Atlanta versus one of those teams. Um, but yeah, it's tough for me based on what we've seen all year to pick anyone but Atlanta. Obviously, Minnesota's a dark horse with, having not lost a map with Standy. And I think there are some other losers bracket teams that are getting hot at the right time. We talked about Gorillas early on. They're very good at search and destroy. If they can maintain that and show some improvement in hardpoint and in control, they could really go on a run. I have them right now pegged at most likely finishing fourth out of everyone in the bracket. I have, so I'll just go over. I have Atlanta over Chicago. Map count, I wasn't too sure about that, but I put 5-3. That felt right to me. Maybe 5-2 even. And then I have Chicago beating New York in the losers bracket final to get there. And then the game before that, I had New York over LAG. So that's kind of how I see it shaken out. Obviously, it probably won't happen that way, but that's what I got. How about you?
I'm just kind of filling it out now. I think um hmm, let's do
London, all the way.
yeah, London over Phase in the final. Um I don't know. I think if you do I think I kind of like Minnesota over New York. I think they like it's really close. I think they could win. There's probably value on the Minnesota plus 1.5, but I don't know. I think basically of the four, I think kind of yeah, New York. I think like an Optic versus Atlanta final is definitely. I think it's in the cards, but I think basically of the top four, in my opinion, are kind of like Atlanta, Minnesota, Chicago, and New York. With like Minnesota and Dallas are kind of interchangeable. That's what I kind of think the top four are. And I think somewhere in there, I think probably the next runner up is kind of like Seattle. I mean, obviously those like they'd be kind of close up there. Um, but like I think because like my elimination round four, which is the one right before the losers round final. Um, well, actually no, the kind of right before the losers bracket final, because I've got New York versus Subliners and Chicago versus Dallas. I'd have Chicago over Dallas, and then I'd have New York over Seattle, and then you probably get Optic over New York. Then you get Optic over Minnesota in a rematch, and then you get Phase versus Optic final. And I'll probably go like maybe I'll go Optic win. The thing is I actually like last time okay. I actually like I tried to submit the bracket last time and I didn't I set the final as like a best of 5 instead of best of 9. So then all my picks were lost. So that was
Oh,
it
that's
was
rough.
it actually went pretty well too. Like I actually had a pretty good bracket, so but oh well.
Hmm.
But
What are your
anyways,
thoughts, real quick, your thoughts on the grand final being a straight up best of 9 as opposed to like 2 best of 5s if necessary, or a best of 9 with like the winners bracket team getting a 1-0 advantage? Like, what are your thoughts on that real quick?
I don't know. I kind of like the two best of fives better. There's a good point in there that we haven't had a really good best of nine yet. Like we only had two, right? And I like the best of nine we had from champs was Atlanta. Dallas had a one game advantage, and then they just kind of steamrolled FaZe in the champs last year. And then this year, Atlanta just steamrolled Dallas. I mean, I was watching the stage one final, and like it was very clear after like the third map how this was gonna go, right? And I
Yeah.
felt like we were just prolonging the inevitable. Like it was like it felt like we were just prolonging the inevitable. We're like, oh, okay, they're up 3-0. Now it would be over, and we can all go to bed. But no, no, now we gotta play map four, and then Dallas wins. It's like, oh, okay, but like it just felt like we were delaying the inevitable, right? Because like it was so clear from the first few matches, like first few games, that Atlanta was just such a better team, right? And like if we got like a 5-4, like if we had like one team wins game one, one team wins game two, like then it would be good, but we haven't had that yet. And I mean, that's because we haven't had it. Like that we will if we keep doing these best of nines, eventually we're gonna have a 5-4 best of nine that was like riveting, right? But I don't know if we're like I like when you do more things like and this is actually kind of like this is gonna now come out as like an argument against going to a 4v4 COD now. But basically, what happens is when you go from 5v5 to 4v4, right? The whole purpose in Search and Destroy specifically is that you're more likely to end up with something like a 1v2 or a 1v1 at the end, right? Because when you had 5v5, a lot of times you get like a 4v1, like a 1v4 or a 1v5. Like the last matchup, and like it was one versus five. The one obviously almost always loses that; they can't come back. But when you get down to like a 1v1 or a 1v2, the team who only has the one has a chance to clutch up and win that one. The thing is, if you keep adding more games, you have so many more possibilities of absolute blowouts. You have the possibility of like 5-1, 5-2, 5-3, 5-0, right? Instead of if you only have a best of five, like you can only ever win 3-0, right? You can't win that much, right? So if you basically make you if you have less games, you artificially make the series closer. So like I think I don't know. I want to see a good best of nine first before I want to make any judgments. But like, I kind of wish it was kind of just two best of fives. I think that would probably be better. But
Yeah, I agree. I think what we have now is almost the worst it could be. The worst, in my opinion, is if it was just a best of five, like just a normal match. I think
that
the
would be
best of
pretty bad.
nine, that would be horrible. But the best of nine, we haven't seen a good one yet. You're right. I think there's some intrigue with it. I do think either the best of nine with the winners bracket team going up 1-0. I think that's better. And I think a bracket reset, two best of fives if necessary is good too. So CDL, if you're listening, please just change it to one of those two and we'll be happy. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Anyway,
I kind I don't know. I like there being some benefit to the winners bracket, but I was thinking more about it. Like, you can make an argument that like the winners bracket team shouldn't have an advantage because their advantage is that they just had to play less games, right? So like if you give them a 1-0 advantage in the series or the ability to lose, like if you want to make it the ability to they have to lose and then lose again to lose. Like if they just win the first one and then like if they win the first best of five and then they don't have to play the second best of five, that's kind of fair. But if you give them a plus, like there's an argument about that. It's like it's not the greatest argument. I don't love it, but it's an argument, I guess.
yeah,
It
yeah,
I don't know. I think there should be something though. I don't know. I think two best of fives is kind of cool because at this point we're just abusing it now. It's like we're like, okay, now we're gonna play like every control. Like, well, control sucks. So like now we're gonna
yeah.
play like, oh, cool. Now we have to play Garrison and Checkmate. It'd be like, no,
Yeah. Also, the format with just a straight up best of nine, nothing else. Was not expecting to see four search and destroys. Like that's kind of a big deal because I believe it goes hard point search control, search hard point search.
so
Which like which
they had to mix it up because they wanted search to be if it went to game nine they wanted search to be nine. But if you have the one team up one starting off one, I think it's only a best of eight, at which point then you can make the search game eight without having to mess it
exactly
up. So like they kind
exactly
of screwed themselves over with that. But
yeah yeah.
I don't
Just
know.
another reason why they need to switch it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, like if you did a best of eight, it's basically best of eight. The winners brackets up 1-0. That would be pretty good. I don't know. It's weird, and it's just weird the way the map pool works this year, and I think we need some better maps and stuff, and like just having like watching a best of nine, knowing that like, oh cool, we had like two good maps, now we have to watch a control. They're like, okay, like control is fine as the middle map, but like when we're in a best of nine, and now we're like, okay, every like third map we're gonna play as a control now, and especially if the series is over and you have to sit through a checkmate control, you're just like, okay,
I mean, it's
like
better than domination at least, right? You're in agreement with that?
I hate Garrison Control. Like I mean, okay,
Okay.
fine. Dom is some of those Doms were horrible last year. Like some
Yeah.
like Hackney Dom was horrible. But like
Yes.
the thing is it's different because like at least there was constant action at point A, right? It was always like, okay, yeah, we can get point A, we can get point A. And like you can always watch point A and be like, cool, here's the battle at point A that was gonna determine the fate of the map, right? But like now it's like, cool, okay, they captured point B and now everybody's gonna throw themselves at point A and they're just gonna die. And like now you have to clear so much stuff. Like it's and like checkmate is also really annoying because then you have to get to the plane and you there's so many ways that they can get at you underneath the plane, and it's frustrating, and it's kind of it's weird, but I don't know. I think control works a lot better as a 5v5 mode rather than a 4v4 mode, because in 5v5 you could always just send a random person off somewhere and be like, cool, contest this point, and then that buys you time, whereas now you have to put all four people on basically one point to get it. If we got the with the new changes probably for the next stage, when you get 20 seconds for capturing one of the ticks on control, that's probably better. It'll fix some of the problems, but it won't fix all the problems, because you're still going to have a bunch of cases where um they're doing something along the lines of like, because basically it's still going to run out of time faster, right? You need the ability to contest points, right? And I think this is kind of where with 5v5 you could just send a random person off to like you could be contesting, kind of sending people on both points at the same time, so like the round would get extended, and then lives mattered more than they do now. Like lives very rarely matter in a round, in terms like sometimes they do, and those are the best rounds that do, but when lives don't matter, like when most of the time lives don't matter, it just kind of gets boring when time's the bigger concern. But I don't know. I think it's just there's some apps we need to get rid of. I think hopefully we'll see this soon. But I think checkmate needs to go. I think. Uh,
Agree.
yeah, checkmate S&D definitely. The question though is the fact that the problem though is that season 3 is going to come out basically the day of the start of stage 3. So if there's a new map, if something like standoff or hijack comes in, then like the problem is they'll have like a day, and I'm not sure if they can add it to the map pool in between the first week of stage one and the first week of stage three and the second week of stage three. I don't know if they can. They might do it because they hate checkmate so much. But
Yeah,
like
honestly, they might, but the timing on that's really bad. Wow.
it's so, because I timed it out and I'm like, oh, that's really bad. Like if it was day like if it was like, oh, if it was the Monday and then stage, they have it by then. Like they hate checkmate so much and they love some of those maps so much they do it, but like it's that day. So like if they get
Mm,
advanced notice that certain maps coming, maybe they like preemptively. It depends how much they hate checkmate though. Like I don't know. I don't know how much the pros hate checkmate. So, but we'll have to see. But anyway, I think that's pretty good. That's an hour and 15 minutes there. That's pretty good. So, that's pretty much it for our picks for stage 2. Um, maybe we'll do another podcast before stage 3, kind of getting our picks about who could do what in which pool, and map changes and meta changes, etc. So, thank you, Ryan, for coming on today.
yeah, thank you for having me. Really had fun. Thanks.
Yep. And yeah, this is the first ever LeanTossup CDL podcast. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you soon.